Hey everybody, it's Mike. It's Friday, October 15th, 2021. And what I'm going to do in this video is take you through a document I received from a source. I'm not going to publish the document at the request of my source. The document comes to us from the North Carolina Department of Commerce, Division of Employment Security. It's an inter-office communication. It's dated October 12th, 2021, and it comes from the Office of the Chief Counsel. What the document does is to lay out the guidance to those within the governmental system who are deciding whether somebody who refused to take the injection at work can collect unemployment. So what I've done is to put a few slides together to capture the highlights of what this document spells out. It's 7 pages long. Now, before I get started, I am not an attorney, so I am not giving legal advice. If you are in a situation where you require legal advice on this topic, it is highly recommended that you hire an attorney who specializes in unemployment. Okay? All right, so the first slide is just a summary. On October 12, 2021, the North Carolina Chief Counsel released guidance on collecting unemployment for mandate refusals. The document opens the door, allowing workers released from their jobs to collect unemployment. So the document is actually very promising. Now, it's very important if you are in a situation where your employer is requiring you to take the shot that you thoroughly document your reasons for exemption with your employer. As I was reading through the document, it became very obvious that you should familiarize yourself with the Americans with Disabilities Act and also Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a federal law that prohibits employers from discriminating against employees on the basis of sex, race, color, national origin, and religion. It generally applies to employers with 15 or more employees, including federal, state, and local governments. Title VII also applies to private and public colleges and universities, employment agencies, and labor organizations. Okay, let's move to the next slide. The Chief Counsel from the North Carolina Division of Employment Security has issued guidance on how appeals hearing officers are to treat unemployment cases involving termination of employment or resignations related to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate refusals. The guidance states that if a claimant can demonstrate a, quote, compelling medical or religious reason for declining the vaccine, then the hearing officer can find that either 1, the claimant was not terminated for willful misconduct, or 2, the claimant's voluntary resignation in lieu of taking the shot was for good cause. Both would entitle the claimant to full unemployment benefits. If you are employed in North Carolina and facing termination for not taking the shot, it is important to submit documentation to your employer citing either a religious or medical exemption before separation from employment. This was a very important thread in the document. You must submit your exemption documentation before separation from employment. Make sure your medical documentation is as comprehensive, clear, and reputable as possible. If you are citing a religious exemption, make sure your religion meets the criteria to be recognized under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, especially if you are not citing a major religion. Use as much detail and emotional language as necessary in your religious exemption to demonstrate a, quote, sincerely held religious belief. The standard for whether or not exemptions are compelling for Division of Employment Security is not necessarily the same as your employer's policy. And what this means is that because your employer has a policy about injections, that does not mean you cannot collect unemployment. And the document also states that the employer should have a written policy, and that written policy should be disseminated to the employees, meaning it should not be a verbal policy. It needs to be documented, and the employees need to know about it. Let's move to the next slide. Division of employment security is essentially leaving it to the hearing officer's personal discretion, meaning whether you will be eligible for unemployment benefits. Even if your employer did not approve your exemption, the hearing officer may find that your reasons for declining the injection were valid and can approve you for benefits. Make sure to submit copies of any exemption documentation you submitted to your employer prior to separation from employment. Do not assume the employer will submit this on your behalf. So it's very important you get all of your ducks lined up. It's extremely important that your documentation existed prior to your separation and that your documentation was presented to your employer. And do not assume that your employer is going to furnish your documentation on your behalf. If you are planning to make the argument that your religion should be recognized under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, include a copy of the law among your documents with relevant portions highlighted. And by including all of this documentation, you're making the job of the hearing officer a little easier. And it could possibly help in securing approval of your unemployment benefits. Okay, in other words, don't wing it. Make sure that you have everything well documented. Okay, so this is the last slide, and it does appear that other states are adopting a similar policy, but to verify, you're going to have to, in all likelihood, reach out to an attorney that specializes in unemployment. Now, the document that I just took you through, and again, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. I went through the 7 pages, and what I just presented to you is my interpretation of what I read. But because the document was an inter-office communication, that means it was internal, not external, meaning the content of the document, at least as of today, is not for public consumption, which is wrong in my opinion. Because considering the situation that people are facing, it sure would be very helpful to publicize how to go about applying for unemployment benefits properly so that you can secure the benefit. But with the way this world is going, in all likelihood, something as common sense as that is not going to happen. And that's why I felt it was very important to take everyone through this document, through this guidance. Okay, so these are my suggestions. And again, my suggestions, not legal advice. But if it were me and I was faced with termination or resignation for refusing the shot, then I would seek an attorney who specializes in unemployment. The attorney should be aware of this document, this guidance. And if you live outside of North Carolina, you live in another state, again, the document I took you through was North Carolina specific, then you should research your state's DES policy on the mandates or schedule a consultation with a private attorney who practices unemployment law. Okay? All right, so I hope this was helpful. It would be wonderful if anyone has additional information on not only North Carolina, but their own state within the United States. and across the world for that matter. Maybe we can get a feel for what's going on in other places. All right, so thank you for listening, and we will talk soon. Bye now.